Hello everyone, it's always good to be with us again. This is the Eco Farms and Agro Services Company. Um, my name is Benjamin. We are located the Jos Plateau, where we're engaging on a number of agricultural products and services engagement with Nigerian farmers. We're heavily invested in protected cultivation, conservation agricultural practices, agroforestry, and a number of other things. I thank you all who have been sending in your questions, sending in your comments to make your own contributions. Thank you. I encourage us to continue to do that. This is the only way we can work together to help strengthen the capacity building for smallholder farmers and investors alike. Today we are going to be engaging on nursery operations. This is one key area where farmers get it a lot wrong. From the phytosanitary measures to nursery husbandry, construction of the nursery itself, management of the nursery, sowing of the seeds, and eventual transplant. And so today we will look at some of these key tips that will help. First off, let's talk about the construction of the nursery. A nursery, essentially, it's just an environment where we nurse, as the word says, young plants from seed to the point where we transplant them to the open field or the main greenhouse or screenhouse, as the case may be, where we intend to plant them. And so they spend their first few days, first few weeks and months in the nursery. And the operations of this nursery management, if we, as they say, these plants have a basic challenge as young plants in the nursery, that challenge goes on with them for the rest of their lives. The nutrients, the disease, the handling and the nursery. And so when you're constructing your nursery, you want to take into consideration some key things. You want to look at your shading. These young plants do not need a lot of sun, in as much as they need a lot of sunlight, but not so much, not so harsh. And so when you construct your nursery, depending on the size of your farm, I used to encourage farmers to set up nurseries in sets and stages of time. You don't need a very elaborate nursery for a start. You can use a very small region within the farm to manage the nursery planting. And over time, as your farm expands, you can decide to set an elaborate nursery. But key things you need to look at is the phytosanitary measures. My farm workers careful to sanitize themselves as they interact with the nursery so they do not bring in disease from the main farm to these young plants. So we recommend that you set up a food bath, you set up a hand washing station, and there is a supervisory oversight on every staff coming into work there. And then in the eco farms, we recommend that when you decide to set up a small nursery like we have here, a 10 meters by 8 meters nursery, you consider properly fumigating before you set up the platforms where the trays will be set up. That you wash the nursery trays, just precautionary, and that you double check to ensure there are no pests like crickets, slugs, mollusks like snails, and importantly rats, because these pests feed on young shoots of plants. And so when you do that, the next thing you need to begin to look at is what crops am I intending to plant in the nursery. Here we grow a lot of plants, essentially peppers, tomatoes, cabbage, and the likes. These plants at very young stage do not require a lot of sunlight, so it's important that in setting up your nursery, you shade. Just 50% shading will do. But what you need to also remember is that when transplanting your plants, because they are used to an environment with shade, you do not take them all of a sudden to the field or the main grow area where they will be exposed to sun. There is a phase and a period of acclimatization. So if you have a bit of shading in the nursery shortly before you transplant, remember to add in and help these plants adjust to more light, adjust to more harshness from the elements before, adjust to less water before you move them to the field. The next thing we need to begin to look at is the planting. One of the key challenges farmers make when they're sowing their seeds is they sow them either too deep or too shallow. There is an average depth you should go, particularly when you're sowing tomatoes and pepper. The reason is that these plants, when they are really deep, they spend a lot of energy trying to come up. And when they are too shallow, they are more exposed and they are sucking down the nutrients and they are not buried. And so it's important that you consider the right and know the right depth to sow. At the eco farms, we have learned in practice that just using cocoa pits to sow our seeds alone, it's not sufficient. And so we've developed in-house some protocols that has worked for us over the years. We sow both in beds on the ground, and we also sow in nursery trays. I'll take us through the two protocols. For the ground sowing, you need to ensure that your ground is free from the pest I earlier mentioned. That's number one. Number two, you need to be sure and certain that the ground is free of weeds. And the best way to do this is to take care of the soil, properly sterilize it, and be sure that there are no weed seeds. The next thing to also look after that is to ensure that the beds are properly raised from the ground, and then that you inculcate organic matter into the soil so that it will be loosed and not cake over time, so that when the young seeds are germinating, they can easily wriggle their head out. And some challenges with such planting method traditional farmers go through is these soils are not well loosed, so when the plants and the water over time, the soil cakes and prevents the young seeds from wriggling out. And if you intend to use organic matter, be sure to properly sterilize before you apply. And in our planting through the nursery trays, we do not use 100% cocoa peat. Reason being that we have observed that young staffs who are managing the nursery are eager to manage and apply insecticides, apply fertilizers, and we have a lot of damage from burns. And so we've realized in practice that when you properly use a sterilized organic matter, properly and homogeneously mixed with your cocoa peat, the young plants are able to have enough nutrient to manage their growth rates for the first 1 month, 3 weeks to 1 month, before you begin to fertigate or introduce little fertilizers. In that way, reducing the risk of losing your plants to burns from excessive or damages from farm inputs. And so if you intend to go through our method of using the organic matter, we recommend pure cow dungs. They are available everywhere in the country. But what we recommend is that you take these cow dungs through a lengthy process of sterilization. It's a bit local, but it has worked for us. All you need to do is improvise an autoclave using a drum. You sterilize these cow dungs for nothing less than 8 to 12 hours. And then you specify the volume depending on the number of trays you're planting, homogeneously mix, inculcate into your cocoa beets, and then you plant with them. And so if you have this practice in place, I guarantee you that for the first 2 weeks to 3 weeks, at most 1 month, your plants will not need an additional fertilizer. So the next thing we need to look at, when you sow your seeds, you need to be very patient. Depending on the environment you are sowing your seeds, most of the environments where we sow seeds are warm. If you are in a region like we are in, where the weather is averagely cold, you need to understand that germination requires a lot of heat. And so one of the tricks is to find ways to stimulate your seeds to germinate without damaging them. We found in practice that when you properly drench by watering your seeds after sowing, cover them with a dark membrane. We use a dark membrane. It could be a nylon, it could be a dark net. But when you properly cover, you retain moisture and allow these seeds to stay in the dark room for nothing less than 1 week, 7 days. But your first 5 days, you check to see if your seeds are still moist and if you're beginning to see germination, particularly in pepper. And if you find no germination, we recommend that you allow these seeds. Don't be impatient. Don't go digging these seeds out to see if they're germinating or not. Be patient. In 7 to 10 days, tomatoes and peppers averagely germinate. Be informed that your seeds will not germinate 100% at the first 1 week. They may take between 1 to 2 weeks, 14 days to fully germinate. But the moment you begin to see sprouting from these seeds, we recommend you bring them out of the dark room between the first 5 to 7 days to the nursery. Give them some water, open them, replace the dark membrane, the black polythene material with a net material that they can breathe through, that they can have some form of ventilation through. And then you can stagger your watering mildly depending on how dry the environment is. And so when your day-to-day activity will be to ensure that your plants are properly watered for the first 2 to 3 weeks. In some cases, if your germination are delayed, you may, if you go through the method of using the incorporated cow dungs, allow your seeds to stay until you see that they have produced their first 1 to 2 true leaves. True leaves because the cotyledons are not counted as leaves. And at the moment you see the first or second true leaves, you may begin to look into giving them minimum nutrients. In the farming practice, we have learned that starting them off at an NPK fertilizer that is not very harsh, of 20-20 ratio or 15-15 ratio, by 5 grams per knapsack, be it 16, be it 15 or 20 liter knapsack, and gently watering them with the dissolved fertilizer helps these plants to pick up growth. And over time, after a first entry point of a week at 5 grams, you can graduate to 10 grams at this fertilizer. And your plants will do well, your plants will come up, and you should be able to determine when they are ready to go to the field. Mind you, we talked about growing on the bed in the ground. We've realized in practice that growing nurseries in the ground, on the beds in the ground, nurseries grow faster, the plants have more room to spread their roots, therefore they grow faster and they acclimatize to the soil where they would naturally be grown from the nursery. And if you grow them in potting or in planting trays, we realize that the growth is slow. Their roots are limited because of the space in the potting. So we recommend that you use potting trays that have more rooms to take more roots. Don't use the ones that are so tiny. And if you use, then be ready to give them more fertilizers to help them to grow. Don't be in haste in your nursery. Give them time to naturally grow and be able to make the decision. Just some precautions I like to draw attention to. Don't be in haste to give your plants in the nursery fertilizers. Make sure you have the standardized measuring materials to specifically measure the 5 grams to the 10 grams as the case may be. Under no circumstances should you use herbicides to weed your nursery. Under no circumstances should you allow staffs unaccompanied or trained hands to attend to your nursery. Seeds are so expensive, inputs are so expensive, and importantly, the time to raise these seeds from nursery to the point you move them to transplant. If you have any accident, you will lose that entire time.
So essentially, what we're seeing today is a comparison between the raised beds done on the ground as to that of the nursery done on the nursery trays. We've seen rapid growth rates in the nursery on the beds on the ground. We've seen rapid root development. Of course, it's because the soil gives ample room for the roots to develop and to further extend themselves away, as compared to the nursery in the trays, that the roots are restricted and limited to the tray holes. So obviously that done on the natural ground is the best, but you need to be ready to pay the price, which is to properly treat the soil, as we had discussed in the early video. Treat the soil properly, take care of any rodents that will be there to destroy it. And then should you opt to do the options for the trays, then you should be ready to also invest in the care, the proper watering, the proper pest management and fertilizer applications. So this brings us to the end of the training on the nursery management, effective today with transplant, and we'll continue to bring you updates from the farm as these crops are developing.
I'll be happy to take questions. We don't have all the time to teach these things in these videos, but we encourage you to send us questions that will help us to send you tailored answers. What are the challenges that you're facing in your farms? We'll be happy to attach an agronomist to answer you. We'll be happy to also keep in touch, to know your successes, your failures, and see how we can strengthen each other. I'm always excited to answer questions. Thank you for keeping tuned. Thank you.